Hello, and welcome back to I'll Watch What They're Watching, where we're curious and adamant about cinema. I am one of your hosts, and my name is Kiri.
And I'm Adam.
And today we're doing yet another one of our Ghibli episodes, because as we've discussed before, we basically just can't get enough of the studio. And so rather than just doing one top three, we were like, let's see how long we can drag this thing out.
That's right.
But first, we like to talk just kind of about some things that we're watching, if we caught anything in theaters, and then I have a little bit of news as well. But I'll let Adam take it away first. Have you been able to get to the theater for anything lately?
Yeah, I actually went and saw Kokuho, which is a Japanese movie. I saw it because it is nominated for Best Makeup and Hairstyling at the Oscars. Honestly, I think it's almost more of a snub in other categories than why did it make it into this one. I do think there's some issues. I do think I had a good time with it, but I think there's some red flags I have. We can talk a little bit more in the Oscar episode, but I'd advise anyone to seek it out that's able to. And I think based on what I've seen, and I'll talk more about this obviously, but I think it's my front runner for that category. So kind of an exciting thing to be able to see. So I had a good time with that.
Yeah, for sure. Nice. I again did not get to the theater because I'm in midterms right now, but like I said, I got a little bit of news. So I've decided to minor in journalism.
Awesome.
And with that, I approached the CU Independent, which is CU Boulder's student-run newspaper, and I am going to start writing reviews.
No kidding.
Yeah, so kind of how it'll go is I'll talk briefly about them on the podcast, and then on my Substack I'll probably just have like a little paragraph with then the link to the CU Boulder or CU Independence website, because I talked with them and I basically was like, hey, I have a Substack and run a podcast. How separate do these two things need to be? And they were kind of fine with me kind of giving them a shout out, cross-applying it. But the super cool thing about it is I will basically get like early access to some things.
Well, that's incredibly exciting.
There is for example, a French thriller coming out on Apple TV Plus that I will get access to, and there's currently an embargo on it, so I won't be able to say anything until the actual review comes out. The embargoes will be lifted the beginning of March. I haven't seen it yet because I need to. My editor's trying to figure out how to get me access instead of her so that I can watch it and review it. But super, super exciting. So I'll be able to kind of talk about some earlier stuff here on the podcast a little bit. Like I said, with embargoes, I won't be able to say anything while an embargo is on a film, obviously, other than just, I saw this. And that's literally all I can say. I can't say if I liked it. If I didn't, I can just say I saw this thing and it's coming out. But then once embargoes are lifted, I can talk about it. And anyway, just kind of super exciting. So I'll be posting links whenever I talk about a film that I wrote a full review for the CU Independent. I will post a link in the podcast.
That's so exciting. I'm so happy for you. So, that's going to be such a cool experience. Wow, that's awesome. And for anyone that doesn't know what we're talking about when Kiri mentions an embargo, is basically any movie that comes out does give early access to critics. And so sometimes you'll see up to a movie and they'll start saying in the trailers, this has a 96% on Rotten Tomatoes. And that's usually because that embargo date when they're allowed to post their reviews is earlier. And so it's not always a one-to-one predictor, but something that we keep an eye on is, when is that embargo date? And usually it is a huge red flag if that embargo date is either the day of or the day before the wide release. So it's just something that you kind of keep an eye out for. And then when it releases, a lot of times they release on Tuesdays. And it's like Tuesday mornings, I'm always texting Kiri a bunch of, this movie's doing well, this movie's not. No, that is so exciting. That is so cool to be able to to be able to get those reviews out. You're going to do a great job. I have read what you
I
write, and
appreciate
you
that.
write beautifully. I'm really excited to see how that all turns out.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited. I applied a couple weeks ago and messaged them earlier this week, and they were really, really nice at the meeting tonight, just basically telling me, they were like, "Hey, by the way, like, we were looking through and we were like, because I am a film major, that's kind of the thing, is they were like, we kind of like, we're looking for someone specifically like you to fill this slot."
Sure, that makes a lot of
So they were
sense.
like, so yeah, because again, I am film critical, like a critical film studies major, journalism minor. So yeah, I'm super excited. And when they sent me the first email, they were like, yeah, we actually have this really cool partnership that allows us to see some movies early. So like, she was telling me that she got to go to a panel back when Luca Guadagnino's recent film came out with Julia Roberts and Andrew
Yeah,
Garfield.
After
Got
the
to go
hunt.
to a panel and like, yes, she got to go to a panel and like talk with them and do interview stuff and publish an
How
article about
cool. How
that
cool.
experience. So we'll see, but I'm super, super excited. So like I said, I've got this French thriller that I'll be seeing that should be coming out on Apple TV Plus sometime over the next couple weeks. So super, super excited about that. I will try to get to, I say this every week, but I really will, I'm going to try to get to the theater this week. Last week and this week are very much kind of no promises because I am knee deep in midterms, but I do kind of want to hopefully get to some sort of theater experience
Sure.
sometime over this week. So we've mentioned before that Studio Ghibli films tend to revolve around some certain themes. There's a variety of themes that kind of resonate with a lot of the films, and the one that we talked about last time was environmentalism, and how a lot of these movies really tend to strike this chord of like humans and nature coexisting, how to still preserve nature, kind of the beauty and the magic and the majesty of nature. And another one that I think is related, but not obviously not quite the same, is themes of war, or I think what is more accurate is anti-war.
Yeah, that's a
Because
good It's
yeah,
a
go
good way
ahead.
to introduce it. And I have a quote here from Miyazaki in his book, and he says, "I'm fascinated by wars, and I read a lot about them. People therefore often ask me, Miyazaki-san, do you like war?" And I respond if they think AIDS researchers like AIDS. So and I can't wait to talk with you about one of these movies in particular that I haven't talked with you about at all, which is The Wind Rises, because I think the
Yes.
themes and topics in that one are some of the most deep and complex in all of Ghibli canon, but even just like challenging as any moviegoer at all. And I think that is such an important thing in context. I can't There is a lot of war movies, but I think they are different in the way that they even approach the action scenes of war, which is a exciting way to talk about it and for them to show. So it'll be a good discussion.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's gonna be good. I have just watched The Wind Rises very recently. I saw it last night, so we have not discussed it at all. So I am excited. I mean, you did see I mean, I did have like a sentence long review on Letterboxd, and I did give it a star rating. So you at least know, my relative feelings about it. But we're gonna get into the nitty-gritty of that one. But I figure we could just go in sequential order. So the first one that Nausicaa does have lots of themes of war. That being said, of war. That being said, we did talk about it a lot in the environmentalism one. So we're actually going to the first official Ghibli film, and that is 1986 Castle in the Sky. So it's directed by Hayao Miyazaki. The concept is Jonathan Swift. I think it was in like Gulliver's Travels or something. The idea of Laputa. But the screenplay is also written by Hayao Miyazaki as well. So this is many of these are kind of Miyazaki films through and through that we're going to be talking about today. But yeah, I'm going to let you kind of summarize it and stuff because I really did Castle in the Sky, but you adore Castle in the Sky. So I'll let you chat about it a little bit.
Yeah, it's a fantastic one to start out with. Was the first Studio Ghibli movie that I watched outside of Spirited Away and Ponyo. to kind of start our journey here. Quick plot summary is basically Laputa, or this island in the sky, is something that's sort of this myth, and this girl falls from the sky. Her name is Shita, and she meets with this young boy whose name is Pazu, and they just kind of go on an adventure while pirates and the army and other people are chasing them, and they eventually run into this mythical island in the sky, and you find out more history of different characters and how it connects to everything. So I think movies, right, they give us an opportunity to tap into emotions that we maybe don't tap into every day, or they allow us to feel, or they allow us to process things. And for whatever reason, this movie gave me a deep, deep, deep sense of nostalgia, and of like almost some like deja vu a little bit of like, as I was watching this movie, I just felt like it just felt so familiar. It was a really, really weird feeling, but it felt familiar in this way of like being a child and having this like wonder about the world. Because I'm almost certain I've never seen this, unless for some reason it was on TV one day and my siblings were watching it, but it wasn't that type of sort of like remembering. It was almost this longing and nostalgic feeling. And I don't know exactly what pieces of this movie put that together for me. I will say I almost put this in the environmental category, just because while that's not like the direct theme, I think that that's a huge sort of underlying thing of how we interact with the nature around us. But again, I don't have a lot of analysis for this movie in particular, except for, again, that after Nausicaa, Studio Ghibli really wanted to have this sort of childlike adventure of a movie, because at the end of the day, and they always stand by this, that animation is a medium that it's not just for kids, but it is owned by kids. And I think this movie captures that really well in a way that it's like, it's not that all the jokes, quote unquote, people talk a lot about that in animation of like, oh, the jokes are funny for kids and there's stuff there for adults. It's not really like that. It's more of just like the way that these movies is that they feel like as an adult, you can put yourself in the mind of a kid almost and feel like, yeah, there is a simpler way to think about certain things. So yeah, I adore Castle in the Sky. Really just set me on this journey in a very positive note that I was like, yeah, I'm in.
I mean, I think I'd agree, because and this has been abandoned in favor of the podcast and me having to jump around, but I had started a thing where I was like, I'm going to watch the Ghibli movies in order. And I had seen this one before, and yet maybe a little over a year ago, I was like, I'm going to watch these again. And starting with Castle in the Sky, I was just like, this is something. Like, I watched it with my brother, and it was really, wonderful, wonderful experience. I feel like it starts it on the right foot. You haven't necessarily, in my opinion, you haven't peaked yet. Like, Ghibli's still got a lot that they're gonna do that's even bigger and better, but I think it's a really solid. I mean, I gave it, I think, either 4 or 4.5 stars. Like, I really do love this film. Just a couple war themes that I do want to talk about. I do find it interesting that, because I mentioned before that Studio Ghibli films, a lot of them don't have a clear-cut villain. And if there is a villain, it's less that they're evil and malicious and more that just like they're making choices that either the protagonist or that I like disagree with. This is one of the few Ghiblis that I feel like has an out-and-out villain.
Yeah, no doubt. But I think that they do have the sort of villain you're talking about with Dola, who's the leader of the pirates, who does sort of have that villain, initial, and then sort of that flip mind way through. I did write down this one too that I thought was funny. Miyazaki writes, whenever I started feeling exhausted or disgusted with what I was doing, I felt like yelling as Dola does, get a grip. I hate lazy idiots. So it is kind of funny. Solid. It is kind of funny having that context and rewatching and being like, That's of any of the characters in this movie, she's probably the one that Miyazaki sees himself the most in, which is kind of a funny frame of reference. But I think it is an accurate assessment based on everything I have read about Miyazaki.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that the pirates are actually more anti-heroes than they are heroes or villains, but I do like the flip, and I think that Dola is a very healthy and very, like, strong female character.
Mm-hmm.
The villain I am talking about is I forget his name, but kind of
Right.
secret agent guy. And I find what's really interesting about him is you have an out and out, a straight up villain in this one. You have an out and out villain. This guy is bad news. And I find it interesting that his sole, like, purpose in this film is, like, power.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is what Miyazaki sees as, like, this is villain, someone who seeks power and destruction. Because a lot of these others, it's more just about the devastation of war and how war is just a horrible thing that doesn't help anyone. Whereas this one is the villain is a person who seeks power, a person who seeks destruction. And I just kind of wrote as well, like, power corrupts. Like, that's,
Mm-hmm.
that famous quote where it's like, absolute power corrupts, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel here, is like the messaging here is, yes, war is terrible, but the truly evil people are the ones who seek this sort of extreme power and who thrive on destruction.
Yeah, really well put. My last fun fact on this one is that John Lasseter, bigwig up with Disney Pixar, this is a big favorite of his. And he even says that he took a lot of inspiration from sort of there's one scene sort of at this castle place, not in the sky, where it's kind of a lot of war and there's a rescue and all this stuff. And he says that scene in particular inspired some different things going on in A Bug's Life. So watch both of these movies and see if you can see those connections between the two.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and it's also one of I don't want to get too much into this because I think we'll get into it a lot more in a couple others coming up, but it is one of many movies that romanticizes flight and just what
Yes.
it means yeah, it's the castle in the sky, what it means to kind of embrace, in some environmentalist themes, to embrace wind. And I mean, Nausicaä of the Valley of the Wind as well, but there seems to be many movies that kind of romanticize what it means to fly, and it almost views flight as kind of this freedom.
Yes, exactly.
But the next one, this is what's known as, like, the big sad one. So the next one that we're going to be discussing is Grave of the Fireflies. Came out in 1988, directed by Isao Takahata, written by Isao Takahata, adapted from Akiyuki Nosaka's novel, which is autobiographical. It's sad. It's a big sad.
Yeah, I would say spoiler alert for this one, because I think if you haven't seen this movie, even if you don't like animation, even if you don't like kids movies, whatever, this is one of those movies that, like, everybody should see at least once in their life, and probably only once in their life.
I will probably see it again, but I think I'd agree. For me, it's in almost the same camp as, like, Schindler's List, where I do think everyone should watch it. I also would not ever force someone to watch it, because I think you need to be in the right mindset to be able to watch this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did forget to mention that I actually had seen this, way before we done the podcast a couple years ago, but did not revisit it in this rewatch.
No, I've also only seen it the once, and I do see myself rewatching it at some point, but so yeah, we'll just get right into it. This is at the very beginning, so I don't feel like this is too much of a spoiler, but, like, and it's kind of well known about the film, but if, so this little part, not too much spoiler alert, but we will kind of get into some things. It is a depiction of war and the aftermath of war from the viewpoint of two kids, and the kids die.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is how the film starts, with the older boy who's like 14 or 15. He dies of starvation and his spirit is reconciled with his sister. So from the beginning, this boy dies by the end and his sister is already dead. And so like there's not a delicate way to say that. Like this is a devastating film.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, brief summary, it starts off with their town is bombed. Their father is out at war. Their mother dies in the bombing. Her burns get to her and she passes away. They go to live with an aunt, I believe, but they are just miserable. I mean, it's this boy, he's like 14. His sister is probably, I mean, 5, if that, like no older than 5, more likely is probably 3 or 4. They're miserable there, so the boy decides he wants to try to provide for them basically by himself, and the idea is that he's just got to hold out until their dad gets back. And it's the horrors of war from a kid's perspective. So it's just, you see the struggles to get food. And like what's so heartbreaking about this is like they don't die from a bombing, they don't die from radiation poisoning, they die from starvation. And I think what's so like heartbreaking about that is it's not just the horrors of war, but like the aftermath, like the scars of war linger and affect people. And so like because it even talks about like parts of the country, even parts of that city are healing. Like people are now able to eat and things are going better. And yet just at the bottom of this hill, teenage boys are dying of starvation. So yeah, I don't know that we want to talk like too terribly much about this just because it is just like I watched it on a Saturday night and I cried a lot. And then the next day, anytime I thought too much about it, I started crying again. And I was like pretty depressed for like a week.
Yeah. It's worse. Like, yeah. It is it's an interesting one. I feel like there's no nuance to it, like
no.
War is just bad, and that is just very clear. And it's like there's like you said, some unintended things going on with it. So I don't know that I have a lot to say about it, except for it's just one of those things that unfortunately, because of the really bad world that we live in, because of the current atrocities going on right now in our world that our government is complicit in many ways, it is one of those things that's like you kind of do have to keep reminding yourself every once in a while just to have sort of that humanity at the forefront and be able to fight against things that are so wrong and be sure to have your voice heard and show up in those moments. But tough watch regardless. It's great animation. There is some
gorgeous.
Yeah, great imagery, great there's some relative peace, but still just a harrowing, tough. Anyone that's seen it will agree. And it often does. I was just looking at a few things and there are a couple, best animated films of all time or Sight and Sound list that you mentioned that it shows up on there and shows up at the top of animation list. So is one that is extremely high regarded. 8.5 IMDb rating, which is one of,
it's like
you don't
number 32 or something.
Yeah, you
on
don't
IMDb.
see much higher than that. 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. You don't see much higher than that with how many views it has. Definitely has all the accolades, definitely has all the recognition. That's just really sad.
Yeah, like if you look up just like if you were to just Google like my brother did this when he watched it for the first time. He was just feeling like really down one day and was just kind of, when you feel really sad and you just kind of want to wallow in that sadness. He just looked up like saddest movies. And he saw Grave of the Fireflies and read the synopsis and went, that sounds sad. He put it on and finished and he was like, that was sad.
It's like, oh, that's a different sad than I was feeling. Okay. I'm gonna all right.
Yeah, it was just something that's kind of interesting. I mentioned this with the episode where we talked about My Neighbor Totoro, but it was a double feature with My Neighbor Totoro just because Totoro basically didn't get greenlit. And so the only way for it to be released was to partner it with. They basically got the confirmation from the author of the novel, Akiyuki Inosaka. He kind of gave them some backing to do Grave of the Fireflies, so they were able to release them together. It looks like Totoro was screened first, though, and most of the people just watched Totoro and then would leave.
Ooh.
According to some trivia that I read, I don't know how accurate that is, but that tracks. Like especially if you're taking your kids to see it, like you watch My Neighbor Totoro, you have a good time, and then you're like, all right, catch you later. I'm
It
not
is,
gonna stay for this 90-minute
and
sad fest.
I had heard that trivia before, at least that they were released at the same time together and had a double feature type thing. And it is funny because a lot of people will come onto Reddit and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sad. I don't even know what to do. And people are like, watch Totoro. That's kind of how it was
Yeah.
intended. But it is interesting that this one is Takahata. If you'll remember, him and Miyazaki are kind of the two main directors that founded Studio Ghibli. So it is interesting that Miyazaki has Totoro and Takahata has Grave. It's just interesting, that process, because obviously they were both kind of concurrently working on each of those together within the studio.
Right.
So I imagine that was a really interesting time for the studio.
I mean, I read sometime that some animators would almost have to be like, wait a minute, which one am I working on today? Like, am I working on the super, super sad one, or the one that is filled with light and joy?
Right.
So anyway, I mean, yeah, that's Grave of the Fireflies. I mean, when I describe it to people, I'm like, it's about two kids in war-torn Japan. And that's what it's about. And it's just, I mean, it's sad. That doesn't sound like a happy premise, and it's not. And I think it's a powerful film. I think it's a beautifully constructed film. It is also the saddest film I have ever seen.
Amen.
But now let's get into another one of your favorites that you love, so I'll let you talk about it a little bit. And that is 1992's Porco Rosso. So
Yes.
also directed and written by Hayao Miyazaki. And yeah, I just wrote in my note, I was like, let Adam talk a lot, because I like this one. I think I liked Castle in the Sky more than this one, but kind of like Castle in the Sky, I really like it. But for you, it's like top tier. So I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, so I think my perception of this one, I was kind of like, I almost imagine this one would be more like a Pom Poko than what it really is. And what this movie is it's just, I don't know. I think just seeing the pig itself, I thought, and I think even in early conversations when you would talk about Pom Poko, or I can't remember, but as you talk about Ghibli films, it's kind of like, oh, watch these with your kids, or oh, this is not for your kids. And I think for whatever reason, I just assumed Porco Rosso was like wildly violent and like, this super adult movie. It was just my assumptions going in.
Yeah, because I do remember telling you, like, Porco Rosso specifically is one that I didn't tell you it was super violent, but I can see where you got that impression, because I said, like, Porco Rosso is kind of the one that is specifically not for kids. Like,
Right.
It definitely is one that's for adults. It is not horrifically violent. It's actually fairly, like, kid-friendly as far as content, but the themes in the story are just more mature.
And I think that's almost the entire point of it. That first and foremost, this movie is absolutely, all it is it's anti-fascist film is what this movie is. It's set in the just after or during World War I in Italy. And it's Porco Rosso is essentially this almost bounty hunter that will kind of work for hire to like stop pirate raids in planes. But he's this retired ex-Italian army pilot, and he just goes about, and the pirates get pissed off, and so they're trying to track him down, trying to shoot him down. His plane gets down, he has to repair it, and there's some love interests along the way. But the whole time he's doing this, he is a literal pig, and no one else in the movie is a pig, and it's never really like looked at as this really weird thing.
Nope.
They like comment on it and they like talk about him being a pig, but it's not like this, like he like walks into a room and no one really cares. So it's just a really funny way to do it that I think works really, really well.
I actually have a question about this, since we're on this subject. What do you think the pig face represents? Like, do you think there is any like symbolism or representation there, or do you just think it's just something goofy that Miyazaki threw in?
No, I think it is a physical representation of sort of his regret of taking place in as a part of the war and in service of this fascist regime. So I think that's ultimately what it's sort of representing. And I think you get a lot of that, especially in the really beautiful part where he's talking about sort of the experience he had where he nearly died, and there's kind of the plane graveyard type thing. But yeah, what did you have any interpretations yourself?
Kind of the same. I would agree almost exactly with what you said. I think it is just, it's a way, like with novels and stuff, you can talk about a character's inner emotions and feelings and turmoil. In a film, it's harder to do that without like narration or voiceover. There's a lot of show don't tell in cinema. And so I agree. I think it is a physical representation of his past and just how he feels about it, possible regrets, possible how he sees himself, because I do find it very interesting that his love interest, he almost seems to, he doesn't necessarily like the fact that he looks like a pig, but he is also very unwilling to like, he carries it almost as a burden, like, I deserve this.
Yeah.
And his love interest seems to, I don't know, yeah, feel differently, but I don't know, there's an interesting scene with an exchange between them that I don't wanna get into for spoiler purposes, but
yeah, and I'll say too
almost
that
exactly what you said.
And there's two specific lines that I'm also not going to spoil because they make the movie, that I think directly take sort of the pig, which is this gross, undesirable thing by all accounts by most people, and juxtaposes that again to fascism or this, power dynamic, and says, well, you know, even what I am is better than what that is. Again, I sent you an essay once of what someone wrote about this movie one time, because
Yes.
I do think this movie is just a perfect critique on fascism, and the way that it talks about it too, of like, he is this ace pilot, and in most movies it gives you this release of this really cool dogfight, and this movie in some ways kind of pulls the rug under you as far as what you expect and what that actually looks like.
Totally.
We talked a little bit about Castle in the Sky being for children. Well, what Miyazaki says about Porco is that and he writes this in those like director memos, which is basically just a couple pages, just kind of giving the spirit of what we're trying to go for with this movie. And he says, we must never forget that, first of all, it is a cartoon movie for tired, middle-aged men whose brain cells have turned to tofu.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I really, really love Porco Rosso. I think it is, like I said, one of the great anti-fascist films. Really entertaining, really fun. It does go back to what we said at the beginning, kind of knowing Miyazaki and knowing how he feels about war and women and different kinds of things like that, that there are some things in here that do kind of make you pause, like, what are we doing there, Miyazaki? And it's not perfect. I think there are things, it's like, well, the exact framing of the way that we put this female character in this position doesn't exactly work the best. But again, I don't think there's ill intent or anything like that in the way that it's done. Perhaps could have been handled a little bit more cleanly. But I know that's a critique that some have. But yeah, I adore this movie.
What I find really interesting about this movie is how romantic it is. And I don't entirely mean just like the love interests of the characters, like the music is very like,
absolutely,
there's something very elegant, and we'll get into this more with Wind Rises, and I touched on it with Castle in the Sky, but like romanticizing this idea of flight. And that is like, you can feel the freedom and kind of the unbridled joy that Marco feels in flight. Like it's quiet. That is where he truly feels peace. And so when I say romantic, I don't, even though I do think it is honestly incredibly romantic between Marco and I am drawing a blank on the woman's name. That too, just briefly, the portrayal of women I found, Gina. The portrayal of women I actually found mostly really empowering. I think there are a couple issues, but I do feel like the take on women is overall pretty empowering. But anyway, just as far as the romanticism, yeah, I do think Marco and Gina do have a lovely romantic relationship, but just overall there is this sense of just like beauty and romance and elegance to it. Like it's a very classy film. It almost feels like one of those beautiful like these films or something like that. Like it's very this could almost be like a black and white film and I would be like, yeah, I buy it.
That would make a lot of sense.
Just because I feel like it really captures this idea, this just sort of beautiful, poetic, romantic time and experience that I love.
Yeah. No, exactly right. Absolutely.
But the next one, and this was actually the second Ghibli film I ever saw, and this is one of the big ones that I feel like people know about. 2004's Howl's Moving Castle. So directed by Hayao Miyazaki again. The novel is written by Diana Wynne Jones, but the screenplay was written by Hayao Miyazaki as well. There are definitely some differences between the novel and the film, but rough overview is this young lady basically is like picked up by this wizard named Howl, and she also runs into a witch who turns her old, and so she goes searching for Howl, and she eventually stumbles onto Howl's Moving Castle. So she interacts with Howl. There's some stories in trying to get his heart back. There's some showdowns with the witch. There's some stuff with this scarecrow prince character. It is one of the ones that is beloved. While I like it quite a bit, I think it's a little overstuffed, personally.
I wish we didn't, but I think we have similar opinions. I think it's good still. I think
Agreed.
My initial rating was a 4 out of 5, but I do think of any of the Ghiblis, I think it is the most overrated, if I have to give one that's overrated.
I think I'd agree.
Yeah, again, I've only seen it once. I really wanted to rewatch it before this. I just didn't. But I will probably sometime soon. But I think I think a lot of what you said is right. But I don't know.
Because I watched Spirited Away first, and I've talked about this a little bit on the podcast before. I watched it, and I was just like, I have no idea what's going on. Like, a good time, but I don't. Like, this movie is bonkers. I don't know what's happening. Howl's, I felt like, was a good one to watch second, because I felt like it still had some of that nonlinear storytelling where I was like, I still don't entirely know what's going on, but it was more linear than Spirited Away. And there is some really, like, when I watched it the first time, I was like, I really, really dig this. I like the symbolism. I like where this is going. I do love, I think Calcifer is just a 10 out of 10 character. The fire. I love him. And I do like Howl's Moving Castle quite a bit. It just doesn't like hit me the way that things like Nausicaa or Mononoke do.
And now, again, I do want to clarify. The only reason we're saying this is because I think for many people, Howl's is like the number one. This is the top. And again, we like it. And we're going to talk. This is probably the only bad things we're going to say about it. And then we'll just talk good about it. But like, this is number 8 on my list versus many who would have it, 1, 2, 3, or so 3. On and so forth.
Yes.
So that's the only thing that we're saying here.
Right. And that's the thing is, like, I really do love this one. And, like, I loved watching it second. I think it's a good introduction to Ghibli. There's so much that I do love about it. But I think you're exactly right. A lot of people tend to put this as, like, in their top 3. Like, so many people have this in their top 3. This is one of the ones that you hear about. This is one of the... Like, you don't hear a lot of people talking about Porco Rosso. You hear tons of people talking about Howl's Moving Castle.
Exactly.
And I just don't even know if it's not in my top 5. I don't even know if it's in my top 10, if I'm being completely honest.
Okay.
But I do really love a lot of it still, because we've talked about this before. Like, even the Ghibli movies that were like, yeah, they're not my favorite, are still, like, really damn good movies.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I do love about this movie is Miyazaki was really, really upset with the US's involvement with the Iraq War. And this is one of the leading factors that helped him to decide to want to do this movie. You'll notice the dates are similar to around that time, right? 2003, 2004.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think even Miyazaki refused to do any sort of promotion, or I believe this was nominated for an Academy Award, and he declined attending the ceremony because of his anti-war stance in regards to the Iraq War. Again, like we talked about with Grave, I think anytime you're talking about war, it is hard to look back at that as a favorable, positive thing in a lot of cases. And so you do see those themes as sort of these different factions fighting within Howl's Moving Castle. And it's like no one really has a clear purpose or goal, but then there's just this kind of wake of destruction left behind. And it's like, for what? What are we doing here? Like, what is the point? This is silly. You know, and in a lot of other things like Mononoke or Nausicaa, you can at least kind of like understand and be like, yeah, it's not good, but they're trying to do XYZ. And this one, I feel like it's left very, very ambiguous of like, what are we even fighting about?
I would agree. You don't know like what I find interesting about Miyazaki. I feel like with a lot of war films, people focus on the devastation of war, but almost on a very like personal level. Like Saving Private Ryan is about this small group of people. Whereas a lot of Miyazaki's, when he's talking about war, it's just like, look at this senseless destruction. And that's what you see in Howl's. Like there's fire, there's bombs being dropped, there's just destruction, like just violence and just horrors. And I think that's so interesting, is what he's trying to get across is like nothing can justify this kind of senseless just hate. What could like when you see the horrors, it's just like with Grave, when you see these kids suffering, you're like, what could possibly make this okay?
Yeah.
And I think Howl's Moving Castle does a great job of like, you don't know why. There's no explanation. There's no historical context. It's just like Howl opens the door and it's just like, oh, good. There's war as well. Like, I don't know. I think you make a great point with that. Really well said.
I do think the other really positive thing in this one, I think there's good character development in general, but I think pound for pound might be like, there's different things I like and different characters I like, obviously, throughout all this, but I think pound for pound, it might have the best characters. So again, we like this movie, but I think the cast, of Sophie, Howl, Calcifer, Markle, you didn't mention, he's the little wizard, one of my favorite characters in all of Ghibli. I think there's a lot of fun characters, the Scarecrow too, that make this movie really exciting. I think it also says some really interesting things about old age, and sort of the way that the way that people interact with old age and how you embrace it versus not. So I think that there's some really cool things there, I think, too.
One of the things I really like as well, just a couple things. First of all, I really like just how unique some of these designs are. And by that, I mean, like, if you had shown me Howl's Moving Castle and had said this is a castle, I would have been like, I beg your pardon? Because it looks like this weird, like, amalgamation, almost robotic, just odd looking thing. And I think it's really fascinating. Another thing that I love is, just kind of what you said about old age. And I think Sophie's character arc, because the hero's journey is a very common, very popular narrative structure. And I think what I like about it a lot is, and this is a little bit of a spoiler, Sophie gets turned into an old lady, and throughout the film, sort of things become very fluid, where sometimes she's an old lady, and then she appears young again for a couple moments, and then she's old again, and everywhere in between. I find it interesting that at the end, she looks like her young self again, except for her hair. Her hair is still gray. And I think the symbolism for that, personally, I find really beautiful, of like, when you go on some sort of adventure or journey or something, like, you're still you. You're not like, forever changed necessarily, in that she's not a different person. She's not old anymore. but her experience has left like an undeniable mark on her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I really like that.
Yeah. Really well put. Again, if anyone listens to this podcast that are big Ghibli fans, they probably turned it off as soon as we started the conversation about House. But as you can see, we like it. Don't cancel us.
I do like it.
We do like it. We just had to say what we said. But yeah, I want to rewatch it at some point because I love all the Ghibli movies. But yeah, that's where we're at.
We love almost all the Ghibli movies. The court's still out on Earwig and the Witch, but
Right. Well, maybe let's move on to The Wind Rises, which Kiri had the privilege of watching last night. And before you get into it, I think the only way you need to describe this movie is this is literally Japanese Oppenheimer. It's like a historical fiction with some elements of truth in it. So it's like Miyazaki took a real person, a real story, and took quite a few liberties from it. And so it's about the man who created the concept for, and I don't know the exact class, but the specific airplane that the Japanese used in World War II for many of their bombings and missions. And so that's where,
no, sir.
As you can imagine, the extreme sort of cognitive dissonance between like anti-war Ghibli, what you're used to, and then watching this person essentially create this thing that's going to do all these atrocities. Again, if you've seen Oppenheimer, this is very, 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 very similar.
And this one was one of the before The Boy and the Heron, this was the one that Miyazaki was like, this is directed and written by Miyazaki, came out in 2013. This was one of the ones that he came out of retirement and did, and then came out of retirement again later to do Boy and the Heron. And this one definitely, because after I do think The Boy and the Heron is kind of the perfect one to go out on, but after watching Wind Rises, I was like, this is also a really powerful one to go out on. Because I do think it calls a lot to, like, a mentor-mentee relationship, which is what, Miyazaki had with Takahata. Takahata was his mentor, and then they started the studio together. And Takahata had passed away, and I do think The Wind Rises is kind of this beautiful, like, homage to what a good mentor can really do for someone, because you have this character who keeps having recurring dreams of this Italian plane designer. And yeah, it's really interesting. I was really swept up in it. It reminded, I texted you almost immediately. The music reminds me a lot of the music in Porco Rosso. And there was a lot I really liked about this movie going into it. I think it might be a smidge too long, but I also don't really mind because it's pretty. But I was really into it and I was liking it, and I remember because you had been telling me, you're like, I don't know how you're gonna feel about this movie. And as I'm watching it and bopping along, I'm like, I don't know what the problem is. I'm having a great time. Like, it's just about this guy and he's going to school and there's a little romance story along the way. And then big spoiler alerts coming up. So just because I want to give context. So fast forward. But then, his love interest starts to get sick. And this is when I texted you and I said, if this woman dies, I'm going to riot.
Sure.
And then I texted you 20 minutes later and I was like, well, shoot. And then it kind of, it's this movie. I went into it not knowing like, oh, the end is sad. And the end is sad. Because I feel like with Oppenheimer, first of all, it was like, bro, you're playing with fire from the start. In the sense that, like, I don't know that there's necessarily any good that the atom bomb can do. Like, he made a weapon of mass destruction. With this, the lead was enamored with, and this is kind of what I said earlier with Porco Rosso and Castle in the Sky, it romanticizes, again, flight. And he's enamored with this idea of, like, being able to, like, transport humans across oceans, across massive landscapes that would maybe be more difficult to traverse in other ways. And a lot of this movie is about the beauty of just art and whatever form that takes. And for him, it was very scientific and it was plain design. But I think in the form of obviously Miyazaki, with this kind of being an homage to Takahata, his art is a very different form of art. But I do think what it comes to is there's almost this self-reflective point at the end of like, have I done any good?
Mm-hmm.
Because this character dedicates a lot of his youth and young adult life to creating this fighter plane. And he travels the world to do it. He goes through these experiences with his love interest and who then becomes his wife. He has some interactions with his sister. Like, he dedicates a lot of himself to creating this thing. And when he sees it being used for war, there is almost this moment where the character, not quite in like a harrowing, like, what have I done kind of moment that Oppenheimer has, but just I created this beautiful thing. I created this elegant thing. I accomplished what I wanted, and people are like warping it and using it for something that I don't want it to be used for. And I find that I'll give some more thoughts on that in a minute, but I find that a very interesting, very poignant, like, kind of final question that it asks.
Yeah, and I think the reoccurring, again, kind of thesis like you're talking about that's said in the film is the wind is rising, we must try to live. And so it's kind of this idea too that like the war is going on. We know how Miyazaki feels about war. We know how we feel about war. The war is happening, but there's this dream that this individual has, and there's this environment that he is placed in that he's able to accomplish his dream and work towards his dream despite it being used for destruction, like you said. And so it places you in this really difficult position of, do you still do that? Do you still follow your dream?
Right.
I don't feel like I have a clear answer on it, but I think it's such a fascinating question and such a fascinating way to do it. And I think even to Miyazaki, again, who hates war, but who does take very personal touches, like you mentioned, in his mentorship and all these different things, there is so much about animation that Miyazaki hates, and so much about Japanese animes that Miyazaki hates. So you know that as he's writing this and he's taking, some of the most horrific things that happen in the history of the world, you know that he also has that personal touch of like even his own legacy, things that he doesn't know if things that he did have led to things that maybe are, again, not on the same scale, but are they at the end of the day good, like you said? So it's just a fascinating. I was kind of struck down when I watched this of like, oh my gosh, that was really, really impactful. Like, that's a perfect movie that places you in this spot to wrestle with a question and to really think about how that relates to you and how you interact with the world.
Because I keep comparing just because you brought up Oppenheimer. I don't know that throughout, like, Oppenheimer is definitely the protagonist, but he has enough moments that doesn't make him necessarily super likable. The protagonist in The Wind Rises, I feel like, is very likable. And I don't know if it's just like his big Coke bottle glasses that kind of make him sort of endearing.
Sure.
And his just kind of the beauty and romanticism of flight. But I do think that that's very interesting is you see that character wrestle with it too, just being like, I just wanted to make something beautiful and elegant, and now this design that I've created is being used in ways that I don't necessarily approve of.
Yeah, and I think that in the real life example, and this is maybe where some people criticize it, is the real person may not have been that concerned of the way it was been using. I don't know that for sure. But I do think in the way that this movie frames it, it's sort of this, we have to dream, we have to live, we have to love, and we have to do it despite the chance that our dreaming and our loving can be used against us or can be used for evil. And that, if that's not it, then what's the point? And that, so, you have to take that chance, you have to dream, you have to go for your goals. Yeah. And yeah, really beautiful movie. Really, like I said, really, I was like, wow, this was top tier.
I do find it really interesting that you didn't know how I would feel about it. And I, at least according to our Letterboxd reviews, I actually liked it more than you did.
Let's see. I gave it sure. Yeah. You gave it a 4.5. I gave it
I gave it 4.5. I just found it profoundly beautiful and profoundly impactful. And yeah, at the end, just this idea of, have I done any good? And what does that actually mean? Just, yeah, this idea of like, well, we have to keep creating beauty.
Yeah.
And we have to keep, we have to keep finding this beauty and this goodness in things. I don't know. I find that very lovely. Maybe that's naive of me, but I think that this movie does a good enough job of creating that sort of sad impact, because it did finish and I was like, well, that was depressing. That was sad.
Yes, it is in fact sad.
Yeah. And again, you wouldn't expect that. The first hour and a half, I'm just bopping along. And then that last half an hour, I was like, no, everything is going wrong.
Yeah.
But no, I really loved The Wind Rises.
Great.
I loved it a lot.
Well, I think we did last time. Do you want to share where each of these are in our current list?
Yeah.
So starting with Castle in the Sky, I have that ranked 5th. I have Grave of the Fireflies 15th. I have Porco Rosso 3rd. I have Howl's Moving Castle 8. I have The Wind Rises 9.
Okay, just looking at this, again, I'm kind of doing this on the fly, but I think I've got Castle in the Sky at 7. I've got Grave of the Fireflies at 5, because I feel like it's so good.
I don't. Yeah, I don't. I get it.
I've got Howl's Moving Castle probably around 10, 11.
Sure.
Porco Rosso I have at 9, and Wind Rises I have at 7.
Very good. It's exciting.
So it's so sad that like Wind Rises I have at 7, and yet I'm still like, it's a 4.5 star movie. It's really good.
Yeah, basically,
and it's all the way at 7 because there are just so many that I love.
I think 16 and up I have are 4 or higher on my list.
Yeah, they're really, really, really good. But Adam, what are we watching?
The Oscars. So we'll see how we do with recording episodes. I'm going out of town for a little bit, but we may be able to squeeze one in when I get back on a weeknight. And the Oscars are coming up really quick, and I have seen 44 of the 50 nominations. And there are 2 that I'm terrified I'm not going to be able to see now, or kind of 3, but I think I can do a VPN to log into Disney Plus United Kingdom, and that'll work. And I don't know how VPNs, the legality of that, but so far I've done everything legally and paid for things that I need to pay for. But funny enough, the one that everyone seems to be missing is actually Arco. And so there's a rumored video on demand date of February 24th, but it hasn't been confirmed. So everyone's really worried about that one. And the other one is one of the short documentaries just has not showed up anywhere. And they are doing in theaters where you can go and you can see all 15 short films and they show them back to back. But I'm not going to be able to get to one of those. That's the only one I'm going to miss of the short films. Syrah, I'm also a little worried about that's another one that's been releasing in some foreign countries, but I'm not sure about the English video date. So I'm really, really close. I hope I can accomplish it, but there may be some factors outside my control. So that's what I'm watching.
I mean, do you really need to see Arco?
Everyone that I see on these subreddits are like, oh, I'm glad I finally did get to see Arco. It was so good and blah, blah, blah. So I am really, but I did see someone say, was it the dub or the regular one? Because the dub was really bad. So I saw at least.
I told you the dub was horrifying.
I saw at least one person back you up on that. So we'll see if I can see it and see what I think. But yeah. All right.
Again, just the characters can't emote. That's all I'm saying.
Sure. Well, as always.
And I can't care about the characters if I can't tell what they're feeling. That's all I'm saying.
I understand. We appreciate everyone that's listening. Please continue to support us. Follow us on Instagram. Check us out wherever you're listening to podcasts. And until next time.
Catch you later.